Okay, we are now have our full quorum for council here, and this is an attempt at technology. But we're going to just start the meeting by acknowledging that we're gathering remotely in most cases, but here on the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish people, specifically the Lekwungen speaking people known today as the Esquimalt and the Songhees First Nations. Their connections to these lands continue to this day. And also just point out, though there's nobody in the hall except for staff and myself, that this is being live streamed and recorded for future viewing as well. And we do have a very short agenda here today. And thanks to all of council who are on the phone call. I would just maybe ask if you could, if you can, put your phone on mute until I call you. I'm going to go through in just an alphabetical order in talking points in case anybody wants to speak, just to keep things very simple. And then we'll come back to the end for motions, and anybody's welcome to make those at the end. So with that, I didn't prepare any remarks for today's meeting as part of our standard piece, but I just want to say I hope all of you on council and all of you at home are keeping well. And I know these are very strange times, but we are endeavoring as best we can to maintain our operational normalcy as much as possible. So thanks to everybody involved, both council and staff, for making that happen.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Ney.
Sarah here.
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt on this. I was just wondering, we're using a slightly different format here, obviously, but and maybe this will become apparent as the meeting unfolds, but is it possible just for everybody who's in the room here, staff and council, to name who's here? I'm not sure if we got the full contingent of council here, and I don't know who's there at staff. Is that possible?
Absolutely, Councillor Ney. Thank you for asking. So we do, in fact, have all members of council on the call. And in the room with us, we have our CAO, Ms. Varela, our Director of Building and Planning, Mr. Anderson, and we have Ms. Hopkins, the Director of Corporate Services, in the room as well. So it's 3 staff, all of council on the phone, and myself.
Thank you.
You're welcome. No, that's a great question. Sorry, I should have done that. I forget that people need a visual to go along with the word. So. Item 2 on the agenda is really the primary one that we're here for, and it's just the use of campers for self-isolation purposes. And we have Mr. Anderson here to speak to that. So, Mr. Anderson, if you want to introduce this, and I can go to council.
Thank you, Worship members of council. So given our current pandemic situation with respect to COVID-19, we've sort of looked at alternatives to consider for self-isolation for individuals and families. This is something that's self-isolation been mandated by the province, and an alternative that we've sort of looked at is to allow for campers to be used for this purpose. So for those required to self-isolate, this places a demand on families in homes to provide separated space for individuals while in self-isolation. So this may not be practical or possible within the home. And so as an alternative to arranging for this in the home, the proposal is that we'd consider permitting the use of campers on particularly single-family residential property. Right now, the zoning bylaw does not provide for that. It basically provides for the storage of campers on site and also restricts the location of those campers. Campers in the term here meaning trailers, campers, or motorhomes in the community. So the effect of this is not to allow for temporary residential accommodation of this type in the community. So the motion that's and the recommendation that's put forward for council's consideration is that council directs staff to temporarily relax enforcement of the zoning bylaw regulations contained in section 5.1 that prohibits the use of campers, and to section 4.13 that restricts the location of campers on an amendment single-family residential property, so that residents may be permitted to use 1 camper per residential property as temporary accommodation for the specific purpose of self-isolation by persons required to adhere to the orders of the provincial health officer during the COVID-19 pandemic. With that, your worship, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I'm going to go just ask in alphabetical order. So just for the record, that's Appleton, Braithwaite, Green, Ney, Patterson, and Zelka in that order, just to make things simple on the phone. If anybody, as I'm asking for questions, or any clarification requirements, this would be the time. Councillor Appleton, did you have anything? I can just remind everybody to take them
No,
off mute.
thank you.
Okay.
No, thank you, Your Worship. I've got no comments, no questions at this time.
Councillor Braithwaite,
No, thank you for bringing this forward.
Councillor Green,
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for bringing this forward as well. Just one question. There have been instances where people are also sleeping in vehicles. We've had that issue on Roslyn from time to time, and I know there have been other locations in the municipality where people have used vehicles, such as vans and cars or station wagons. How will we address that issue if there are people using their vehicles to overnight in Oak Bay? That's a question.
Mr. Anderson or Ms. Varela?
Your Worship, at this point in time, what Council has before it is to do with campers and the use of campers on residential property for self-isolation purposes. I think the other matter that's been raised is one of that relates to our streets and traffic bylaw and the use of our streets for purposes other than vehicle movement. So this matter doesn't address that in terms of how we will approach if you will, the sleeping on streets. I think that's something that we'd take away and bring back for further consideration.
Councillor Green?
Okay. Thank you. Just one follow-up question. If a resident doesn't have room on their property, per se, for a camper or a motorhome, what would happen if they were camping in that vehicle on the street in front of their home? That gets back, I guess, to the parking bylaw, but I just wondered how we would treat that issue.
Ms. Varela?
So the camping on streets, just to reaffirm, that is a separate issue. And before the pandemic, staff was turning their heads to that kind of regulation. This matter is the zoning bylaw strictly to campers on residential properties, so we wouldn't be opening up the street for that use.
So as it stands right now, then this is purely applies to private property. Mr. Anderson?
Maybe if it's helpful, currently we don't allow campers in front yards and exterior side yards, and what we're basically saying is we wouldn't enforce that locational aspect or that siting aspect. So that I think in the main we could accommodate somebody who needed to put their camper on their property. I don't believe they would need to put that on the street, given not enforcing the regulation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Ney, any questions?
Yeah, just a couple. There were three, but my other one just got answered by staff there, so that's good. The second one is this is just for residential. What happens in instances in multi-residential units where somebody wants to use recreational vehicles for the same purpose here? This obviously doesn't apply to that, but I'm just wondering if there's, at least I don't think it does, but I'm wondering if there's been any consideration to that.
This does refer to specific sections of our bylaws, so I'm not sure if it's included or not. Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, what's before council at this time does not contemplate the use of, say, a parking lot or for an apartment purpose of campers and self-isolation. I think we need to look at that a little bit more closely and see what that might look like. For example, whether there's even designated spaces for storage on apartment sites. The one thing I wouldn't mind mentioning is that I know we're going to want to make sure that if people are using this approach, that they would contact us and let us know, and that would give us an opportunity to help them in terms of siting or any other issues. And I think further on the apartment, if there is somebody that is proposing, we'd ask that they would get in touch with us, and we can look at that further.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, because I was thinking there are a large number of people in our community who are in condos or apartments, and usually their spaces are, of course, more confining than in residential properties. So thank you for that, Bruce, staff. And then you kind of answered my third issue, but I had a slightly different slant to the reporting, that community report to staff. And I was just wondering, I don't know if this is an issue, but you actually helped me understand why you're asking the community to report back to Building and Planning Department if they are using a recreational vehicle for that purpose. My first wondering was, would there be any violation of privacy issues there? I know there's been a lot of, the local provincial health officer has worked quite hard to ensure privacy of individuals who are infected, and I'm just wondering if there might be any issues there.
Go to Mr. Anderson.
That's just staff, obviously.
Through your worship, certainly any of that information that's provided to the municipality would be kept in confidence, as we would with many matters that we have before us. So that assurance we can give to people that obviously when they contact us, we would be keeping a record of same, but we would not be publishing any of that information.
Right. And I was just wondering, it reads in the staff report that it's a request to do that. Is it a requirement to do that too, or how are you dealing with that? Is it more permissive and relaxed, or more a requirement?
We are asking people. We're requesting people to advise us when they set these up, and part of this is for when in the future we are able to sort of wind this back and return to a more normal state. We'll want to make sure that we have all of those addressed.
That makes sense. Okay, and how will the public be informed of this? Is my final question.
Yes, thank you.
If this goes through, how would the public be informed of this?
Yes, we'll be putting some messaging on our website respecting this, and that's how people will primarily learn of that. They can also contact our department if they have any questions.
Thank you, and thank you very much for bringing this forward. I think it's a really valuable thing to do at this time. So, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. I wanted to just add one comment about the privacy piece. Of course, a lot of this is going to be just people taking precautionary measures. It's not necessarily reflective of there being any disease. It's just people who would just want to maintain that separation for extra levels of safety for their families and so forth. So it doesn't necessarily reflect any, from the provincial health officer's requirements for privacy. This is not reflecting, actual diseases. It's just allowing people to apply an additional level of defense, I guess. So I just want to make that point. I don't want people to, if they see a camper, to assume that there's a disease in the building or something. So, then thank you for that, Councillor. Councillor Patterson. You might be on mute, Councillor Patterson, if you're there. Councillor Patterson, did you have any questions? There you are. Hello? No. Okay. Councillor Zelka, did you have any questions or comments at this time?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Is Eric here? Oh, that's fantastic. No, I very much appreciate the initiative of staff to bring this forward. A few minor questions, if I may. Regarding Section 413, it appears to we're seeking relaxations of campers and also of motorhomes. And I presume this would also be relaxation of someone sleeping in a car in a driveway on private lands. That's a question.
Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, no, it actually would not, through your worship, it would not apply to sleeping in a car. The intent here is to have a facility that would provide basically for a person to be accommodated on the property, and there obviously would not be washroom or cooking facilities associated with a vehicle. So the bylaw itself that we're looking at asking to not enforce relates specifically to trailers, campers, and motorhomes on residential property.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. I understand that. The only other question I would have about this is, what about tents? If someone didn't have a camper van, but they wanted to isolate themselves in a tent, say in the backyard or the side yard, or possibly even the front yard on the private lands, is that anticipated as part of this as well, or is that a separate issue?
Through your worship, it's not part of this bylaw, but if somebody was wanting to put a tent and stay in their backyard and then practice safe measures in terms of accessing facilities in the home, that's something that can continue at this point in time without this matter before council.
Thank you very much, and I do appreciate staff's flexibility, I guess, with as we're all practicing flexibility in this unusual time with unusual requirements during the pandemic. So thank you very much. If I may ask one final question related to when this will end. It talks in general terms about the end of the pandemic. However, pandemics often have a phase 2 and a phase 3 that show up. What is the approximate criteria being used to end this temporary initiative, please?
Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, Your Worship. As stated, we're at a point now where we're basically saying when the pandemic situation is no longer declared, we would look at this issue and look at whether or not we'd act on enforcement. I think at this point in time, we would wait until we had basically assurance that there was not a requirement for self-isolation because this is put in place in order to provide for that.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. No more questions.
Okay, thank you. I'll go just back now just to anybody. If there's someone's comments or questions has triggered a question, I'll just ask if there's anybody else from council who wishes to add anything. You're welcome to do so. I'll also just take any motion at this time. Councillor Green?
Yes, I'm prepared to make a motion, but I just have one other question. These larger vehicles have holding tanks and so on. I'm just wondering, are there any environmental concerns from staff's perspective about the longer-term use of these vehicles? Because I'm not sure that we have any facility in Oak Bay for pumping out holding tanks and so on. So I just wondered, are there any concerns in that area? Thank you.
Mr. Anderson?
Your Worship, I think staff are assuming that people would service these facilities if they went on for any period of time, and I am also assuming at this point that the facilities in the region would be available for that, particularly if we think about the use of campers and trailers to provide for self-isolation in this current situation. I think we'd want to make sure that the facilities available to provide for that were open and people could use those.
Thank you very much. I'm prepared to make a motion if council is agreeable.
Hello, it's Esther Patterson. I have one question.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm just based on the discussions that have gone on. Am I then to understand that as part of Oak Bay's emergency preparedness program, there is no consideration for safe shelter in place in emergency situations that supersedes the bylaw?
Ms. Varela?
Thank you for the councillor through you, your worship. Currently, the district didn't have an updated pandemic plan, so we did just redo that pandemic plan. I think it was last done 10 to 12 years ago, and we did not anticipate how that would override the zoning bylaw. So I think the short answer is my best understanding is no.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? We can take a motion anyway and then have questions attached to that if someone wishes to make a motion.
I will move the motion recommended by staff.
Thank you,
Second, Tara.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. So it's moved and seconded. Any other discussion? I'm not hearing any, so I will call the question. I'm just going to go through these in alphabetical order again, if I may, just to simplify the voting. Councillor Appleton?
Voting in favor. Thank you.
Councillor Braithwaite?
In favor.
Councillor Green?
In favor.
Councillor Ney?
In favor.
Councillor Patterson?
In favor.
Councillor Zelka?
And voting in favor.
All right, so the vote is unanimous to pass that. Thank you very much to staff for bringing that forward, and to council for helping us through a fairly interesting and a little bit cumbersome technical piece here, just having a speakerphone call, but I do very much appreciate everybody abiding by that. We do actually under next item on the agenda is new business and reports from other committees. So this is same usual process that we have. Any new business would be motions or notices of motions. I don't have anything to report from the CRD, so that would just be other verbal reports if anybody wishes to make any. So is there any new business at this time? And if not, I'll just go to other verbal reports. Did any of the councillors wish to have anything to add?
Your Worship's Councillor Appleton here. I was just wondering, are we permitted at this stage of the game, just given the operations of staff, are we permitted to put in a notice of motion at this time?
I think it's probably, if depending on where you're at with it, if you feel it's urgent, then we can do that. If not, it might be worth just touching base with staff to get a sense of how best to move something forward. It might, just in the interest that it might be something currently underway, it might be something under the purview of the EOC, or it might be something that needs to come through a notice of motion process. So if possible, I'd prefer councillors reach out to staff first and ask that question, and then bring it forward to council at the next council meeting, which I believe, just having spoken with Ms. Varela before this meeting, I think is going to be April 20th, where we're going to be considering the financial pieces as a general plan.
Okay, understood. I would not classify it as extremely urgent at this stage of the game, so I will touch base with staff first. Thanks.
Okay. But I'm happy if there's any other just sort of reports or from any of the council, you're more than welcome to say anything at this time. Otherwise, we will move to adjournment to in-camera. Not hearing anybody? Nope. Okay. Then we will can I get a motion to adjourn to in-camera as laid out here under section 91 A and C?
I'll make that motion. Do you want me to read the whole thing, or?
I think it's best if you do, just for the record.
Okay. I'll move that in accordance with section 91A and C of the Community Charter, that the open portion of the meeting of council be adjourned and that a closed session be convened to discuss personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality, or another position appointed by the municipality, and labor relations or other employee relations.
I'll second that. It's Corrine.
Thank you, Councillor Green. So it's moved and seconded. All those in favor, I'm just going to go through them very quickly again. Appleton.
In favor.
Braithwaite.
In favor.
Green.
In favor.
Nay.
In favor.
Patterson.
In favor.
Izalka.
And voting in favor.
Thank you. So that passes unanimously. We are now adjourning to in-camera. I'm just going to ask people to stay on the line. We are going to just wait for the streaming to end, and then we will move to our in-camera portion of the meeting. Thank you.